Archivist Keeper had worked at Threshold Station for 300 years. In that time, she had cataloged every important memorial site in known space. Her four arms moved across the holographic displays with practiced ease as she sorted through records that most beings would find impossibly dull, but loved her work. Every memorial told a story, and stories mattered. Today, however, something odd appeared in her daily audit. The system flagged an anomaly in the memorial database. She pulled up the report and her eye stalks widened in surprise. There were exactly 1,247 shrine designations that carried an unusual classification code. She had never seen this code before in 3 centuries of work. All of them were tagged with a single species identifier, human. Tilted her head, confused. She had studied galactic history extensively. Humans were extinct. They had died out nearly 2,000 years ago during the Cascade Wars, a terrible conflict that had destroyed several civilizations and nearly collapsed galactic society. Yet here in her database were over 1,000 shrines, all carefully maintained, all paid for by an ancient trust fund that seemed to renew itself automatically. She pulled up the financial records. The trust predated the current Galactic Council by at least 500 years. Someone had set aside an enormous amount of credits specifically to maintain these shrines forever. The payments went out like clockwork to 1,000 different worlds, paying local caretakers to keep the sites clean and protected. But who would maintain shrines for an extinct species, and why? Decided she needed to see one for herself. She selected the nearest shrine from the list. It was located on 7, a mining world about 3 days' travel from Threshold Station. She filed the appropriate travel authorization and boarded a transport the next morning. 7 was not a beautiful world. Its surface was covered in gray rock and red dust. Massive mining operations the landscape, and the air had a metallic taste even through the atmospheric processors. The who lived here were in species, practical and not known for sentiment or ceremony. Yet when asked directions to the human shrine, every she met knew exactly where it was. Many of them touched their thorax plates respectfully when she mentioned it. The shrine stood on a hill overlooking the main colony city. It was simple, just a statue carved from local stone. The figure showed a human in an environment suit, one arm extended upward toward the sky. The face was worn smooth by centuries of wind and dust, but the posture remained proud and reaching. Around the base of the statue, fresh offerings lay scattered, containers of water, polished minerals, and small notes written in script. An elderly stood near the shrine, cleaning away dust with careful movements. Approached him politely. "Excuse me," she said. "I am from the Galactic Memorial Authority. I am studying this shrine. Can you tell me about it?" The old's antennae perked up. "You do not know the story of Sarah." "I am afraid I do not." The settled onto his lower legs, preparing to tell a tale he had clearly told many times before. 2,000 years ago, during the Cascade Wars, our world was attacked, not by soldiers but by sabotage. Someone destroyed our atmosphere processors, all of them on the same day. We had maybe 3 weeks before the air would become poison. Listened, her attention fully focused. "We sent out emergency calls," the continued. "Some ships came to help evacuate, but we had 3 billion people. There was not enough time, not enough ships. We were going to die, all of us." He gestured toward the statue. "Then she came, Sarah, a human engineer. She said she could restart the processors manually, but someone would have to stay at the core facility. The radiation levels were too high. Whoever went in would die." "She volunteered?" asked softly. "She insisted," the said. "She made our leaders promise to use every available ship for evacuation instead of trying to save her. Then she went into the facility alone. It took her 6 days to bring the processors back online. By the time she finished, the radiation had destroyed her body. But the air was clean again. 3 billion lived because she died." The old touched his thorax plate again. "We built this shrine 1 year after the war ended. Every generation since has maintained it. Every child learns her name. Sarah is not a stranger to us. She is family. Felt something stir in her chest, an emotion she could not quite name. She thanked thee and returned to her ship, but she could not stop thinking about the story. That night she looked up 3 more shrines from her list and plotted a course to visit them. She needed to know if they all told similar stories. The second shrine stood on an ocean world called. There were an aquatic species, living in vast underwater cities. Their shrine was carved into a coral reef, a massive structure that had become part of the living ecosystem. The statue showed a human male in a scientist's coat, his hands open as if offering something. The local guide, a named Aura, swam beside underwater drone as she examined the shrine. This is Dr. Aura explained through the communicator. During the final years of the Cascade Wars, a plague weapon was released in our waters. It was designed to kill quickly. We had no immunity, no cure. Millions were dying every day. What did he do? Asked. He created a symbiotic organism, Aura said. Something that could live in our bodies and neutralize the plague, but it needed testing. He used himself as the first test subject, knowing that the differences between human and biology might kill him. It did, but his sacrifice gave us the data we needed to modify the organism. Within a year, every had the symbiote. The plague ended. Doctor saved our entire species. The third shrine was on a fortress moon called Or. This one was built into the side of a cliff, a towering monument of black stone. The statue showed a human woman in military armor, holding a weapon at ready stance. The local commander met personally. His species was reptilian, fierce-looking, with a reputation as some of the galaxy's best warriors. "Lieutenant Commander," he said, looking up at the statue with something like reverence. She was not, but she understood duty. When the Cascade forces attacked our civilian evacuation, she volunteered to hold the defensive position alone. She said one defender in powered armor could hold the narrow pass for maybe 6 days. That would give the transports time to escape. "How many transports?" asked. 47, carrying civilians from 4 different species, nearly 200,000 beings. The commander's voice grew quiet. She held for 6 days and 7 hours. When we returned after the transports were safe, we found her still at her post. She had been dead for almost an hour, but her automated defense systems were still firing. Visited one more shrine that day. It was in an asteroid habitat called Cluster. Here there were not one shrine, but hundreds of small memorials scattered throughout the colony. Each was simple, a name plate, a date, and a small light that never went out. There were a delicate species, small and fragile, with large eyes and gentle dispositions. An elder named Ra showed through the memorial garden. When the cascading failures hit our habitat, we had only 3 ships for evacuation, Ra explained. Not enough for everyone. We were trying to decide who would go and who would stay when the human miners offered their solution. They said that every pregnant and every youngling would take their places on the ships. "How many humans gave up their seats?" asked. 412. They stayed behind and helped keep our systems running as long as possible so the ships could get away safely. None of them survived when the habitat's power finally failed. But because of them, an entire generation of children lived. My daughter was one of them. My granddaughter exists because a human miner named James gave her his seat. Returned to her ship that night and sat in silence for a long time. 4 shrines, 4 stories. 4 different worlds, 4 different species, all saved by humans who chose to die so others could live. She pulled up her database and looked at the list. 1,247 shrines, 1,247 stories. A pattern was emerging, one that made her breathing quicken with realization. Humanity had not simply gone extinct. They had not lost a war or failed to escape some catastrophe. They had made a choice, a collective, deliberate choice to spend their final days saving as many others as possible. Made a decision. She would visit every single shrine. She would document every story. The galaxy had forgotten what humanity had done, but she would not let that continue. These stories needed to be told. She composed a message to her supervisors, requesting an extended leave for field research. Then she hired a ship and crew. This would take years, perhaps decades, but she had time, and humanity's final gift to the galaxy deserved to be remembered. As her ship prepared to jump to the next system, looked at the list of shrines one more time. 1,247 acts of sacrifice. 1,247 reasons why humanity, though extinct, should never be forgotten. The first shrine had been a mystery. Now it was a mission, and intended to see it through to the end. Assembled her team carefully. For a journey of this magnitude, she needed specialists who could help her understand not just what happened, but why it mattered. Her first recruit was Al, a historian who specialized in pre-council civilizations. They were a thoughtful species, known for their love of stories and their exceptional memories. Al was old even by standards, his fur gone silver with age, but his mind remained sharp. When explained the project, his eyes lit up with enthusiasm. 1,000 stories of sacrifice, he said. This could redefine how we understand the Cascade Wars entirely. I am in. Her second recruit was a pilot who owned a long-range exploration vessel. They were small, quick-moving beings with 6 limbs and an instinctive understanding of spatial navigation. Had a reputation for reliability and curiosity, both essential qualities for a journey that might take years. The third member of the team was not a living being at all. While researching human language databases, had discovered an intact AI core from the pre-war era. The AI called itself VERA, short for something in human language that no longer translated properly. VERA had been designed to help with scientific research and could translate ancient human records. More importantly, VERA had fragmentary memories of the final human years. I cannot guarantee my memories are accurate, VERA warned through the ship's speakers, its voice calm and pleasant. Much of my data was corrupted during the long sleep, but I will help however I can. These humans were my creators. I owe them this. The team spent weeks preparing. Al gathered historical records from a dozen different archives, plotted an efficient route that would take them to as many shrines as possible while minimizing travel time, organized her documentation equipment, and created a standardized interview protocol. They would visit each shrine, speak with local caretakers, and record everything. Their first stop on the grand journey was the garden world of. As they approached, saw immediately that this shrine was different. It was enormous. A temple complex sprawled across several square kilometers, built from white stone that gleamed in the sunlight. Gardens surrounded it, filled with flowers from 100 different worlds. A priest met them at the entrance. Her species was tall and graceful, with flowing robes that changed color with their emotions. She bowed deeply when explained their purpose. "You honor us by coming," the priest said. "This is our most sacred place. Come, I will show you." She led them into the main temple. The walls were covered with names, thousands upon thousands of them, carved in careful script. At the center stood a massive statue showing a human spacecraft, its hull marked with scars and damage. "This is the Mercy's Hand," the priest explained. A human colony ship carrying 40,000 people. They were fleeing the Cascade, heading for a safe system far from the war. But along their route, they found 6 worlds in crisis. Infrastructure failures, cascade effects, systems breaking down. The ship stopped at each world and deployed its people to help. "All of them?" Al asked, already taking notes. "Every single human on that ship," the priest confirmed. "They voted, it was unanimous. They would delay their own escape to save others. At the first world, they stabilized the power grid. At the second, they repaired orbital defenses. At the third, they taught our engineers how to contain a runaway reactor. At each stop, some humans stayed behind to continue the work. By the time they left the sixth world, only a few hundred remained on the ship. Did they reach safety? Asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. The priest's robes shifted to a somber blue. No, the cascade caught up with them before they could jump to the safe system. By choosing to help others, they condemned themselves. But because of their choice, 6 worlds survived. Billions of beings live today because the Mercy's hand stopped to help. We built this temple to honor all 40,000 of them. Every year on the anniversary of their final transmission, we read all of their names aloud. It takes 3 days. VERA spoke through's communication device. I have a fragmentary record of that transmission. Would you like me to play it? Everyone nodded. The AI speakers crackled, then a human voice emerged, calm despite the obvious sounds of alarms in the background. This is Captain Elizabeth Reeves of the Mercy's Hand. We are experiencing critical cascade failure and do not expect to survive. To anyone receiving this message, we made our choice freely and without regret. The future belongs to those who remain. Make it worth what we paid. Reeves out. Silence filled the temple. Even after 2,000 years, the weight of those words pressed down on them. They visited dozens more shrines over the following months. Each told a different story, but the theme remained constant. Humans helping others. Humans sacrificing themselves. Humans choosing to die so others could live. On a desert world called, they found a shrine to a human medical team that had voluntarily exposed themselves to a contagious disease to develop a cure. On a mining station in the system, they discovered a memorial to human engineers who had manually held together a failing reactor core long enough for evacuation, dying from radiation exposure. On a frozen moon, they learned of a human diplomat who had negotiated peace between 2 warring species by offering herself as a hostage to both sides, then refusing rescue when the agreement was threatened. The stories piled up, each one adding to the picture was building. Humanity had not simply helped where they could, they had organized, coordinated, made a plan. It was Al who first voiced what they were all thinking. They were sitting in the ship's common area, reviewing the day's interviews, when he suddenly looked up from his notes. They knew, he said quietly. Humanity knew they were going extinct. What do you mean? Asked. Look at the timeline. Al spread his data across the holographic display. These sacrifices do not happen randomly. They follow a pattern. In the early years of the Cascade Wars, humans fought like everyone else. They tried to survive. But about 20 years before the species went extinct, something changed. Suddenly, every human ship, every human resource, every human citizen was mobilized for one purpose: helping others. VRA's voice was sad. I have been recovering more memory files. Al is correct. The cascade effect that destroyed humanity was analyzed by our top scientists. They determined it was irreversible. Humanity had perhaps 20 years before complete extinction, but the cascade threatened to spread across the galaxy, destabilizing hundreds of other civilizations. So they made a choice, said. Yes, VERA confirmed. I do not have the complete records of the decision, but I have fragments. There were global debates, votes, discussions. In the end, humanity decided that if they were going to die anyway, they would spend their remaining time preventing others from suffering the same fate. Every ship became a rescue vessel. Every engineer became a teacher. Every soldier became a protector of refugees. The species made a collective decision to use their last 20 years saving as many others as possible. Made a chittering sound that was the equivalent of a sob. They could have tried to escape, fled to another galaxy, maybe found a cure. Perhaps, VERA said, but that would have meant abandoning everyone else to die. Humanity decided that was not acceptable. They sat in silence for a long moment, then stood up. We have over 1,000 shrines left to visit. Every one represents lives saved. Every one represents a choice humanity made. Let us make sure their choice is remembered. The journey continued. Months became years. They developed a rhythm, Arrive at a world, locate the shrine, interview the caretakers, document everything. Some shrines were magnificent temples. Others were simple plaques on a wall, but everyone was maintained with care and every local population knew the story of the humans who had saved them. On a trading hub world called Nexus Prime, they found a shrine to a human trader who had bankrupted herself buying and distributing medicine during a plague. On a military academy moon, they discovered a memorial to human instructors who had taught defensive tactics to a dozen species, then used those same tactics to hold off an invasion while their students escaped. On a small agricultural colony, they met farmers who still sang songs about the human botanist who had modified their crops to survive a climate shift, working until malnutrition took her life. The stories were endless but documented them all. Al wrote academic papers analyzing the sociological implications, shared updates on the galactic networks, and slowly, more people began to pay attention. Other researchers reached out, asking questions. News organizations requested interviews. The forgotten sacrifice of humanity was becoming known again. 3 years into the journey, VERA announced that it had successfully recovered a significant memory file. The team gathered in the ship's bridge as the AI explained what it had found. "I have located a record of the final Human Council meeting," VERA said. "It took place on a world called New Havana, humanity's last stronghold. This was about 2 months before the species went extinct. The recording is incomplete, but I can play what remains." The holographic display flickered, then showed a room full of tired humans. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes shadowed with exhaustion. One woman stood at a podium. "We have confirmation from all sectors," the woman said. "The cascade will reach our last systems within 60 days. There is no stopping it. We are out of time." She paused, her jaw tight. "But the barrier network we have built is holding. The cascade will die with us. We have contained it." An older man stood up. "At what cost, Minister? We could have fled, we could have tried." The minister nodded slowly. "Yes, we could have fled and maybe a few thousand of us would have survived to start over somewhere. But the cascade would have spread unchecked, killing trillions across hundreds of worlds. We chose to stop it. We chose to use our last years saving others instead of ourselves. History will have to judge whether we chose correctly. But I know this. I would rather be remembered as a species that died saving others than one that survived while others burned." The recording ended. The room fell silent. Finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "They saved everyone. They saved the entire galaxy." "Yes," VERA said. "That is what I am beginning to understand. The Cascade Wars did not simply end. They were ended by humanity at the cost of their own existence." Looked at her database. They had visited 321 shrines so far. 926 remained. Each one a story. Each one a life given. Each one proof that humanity had chosen compassion over survival. "We need to find New Havana," she said. "If that was their last stronghold, there might be more records, more answers." Al pulled up star charts. According to the historical records, New Havana no longer exists. It was consumed by the cascade, but the system where it was located still has a designation. We can go there. "Then that is where we go next," decided. The journey to what had been New Havana took 2 weeks. As they approached the system, they saw the devastation the cascade had left behind. The planets were barren, lifeless rocks. The star itself had been affected, its output unstable and flickering. Space debris floated everywhere, the shattered remains of stations and ships. But in the center of the system, on what had been New Havana's largest moon, they detected a structure. It was massive, a wall that stretched for kilometers across the moon's surface. They landed nearby and approached on foot. The wall was carved with names, billions of them, in tiny script that covered every centimeter of the surface. At the base of the wall, a holographic projector sat protected by a stasis field. It was still active after 2,000 years. Activated it. A human appeared, an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair. "If you are seeing this," the woman said, "then someone survived. Someone made it through the Cascade Wars and found this place. Good. That means it worked. That means our sacrifice meant something." She smiled, though tears ran down her face. "My name is Dr. Sarah, yes, the same one. I survived 7, actually, by sheer luck and medical technology. I have been asked to record this message on behalf of all humanity." The team exchanged glances. This was the engineer from the first shrine had visited. "This wall behind me contains every name of every human who died during our final 20 years, Doctor continued. "All 6 billion of us. We could not save ourselves. The cascade could not be stopped, only contained. But we ensured that you would survive. We spent our last days, our last hours, making sure the galaxy would continue." She took a deep breath. "Remember us not for how we died, but for whom we saved. Remember us not as victims, but as people who made a choice. We chose you, all of you, every species in this galaxy. We chose your future over our present, and if we had to do it again, we would make the same choice." Doctor stepped closer to the camera. "The future belongs to you now. Make it worthy of what it cost. Build something beautiful. Build something that lasts. Build something that honors not just us, but everyone who has ever sacrificed for others. That is all we ask. That is our final request." The recording ended. Stood motionless, all 4 of her arms hanging limp at her sides. Tears ran down her face, something rarely did. Al was openly weeping, had curled into a small ball, overwhelmed. Even Vera was silent for a long moment before speaking. "I remember now," the AI said softly. "I remember volunteering to go into stasis, to be preserved in case anyone ever found the shrines and had questions. I remember Doctor asking me to tell the story if anyone ever came looking. I am glad you found me. I am glad I could help." Looked up at the wall of names. 6 billion humans, 6 billion sacrifices, and 1,247 shrines spread across the galaxy, each marking a place where humanity had chosen to save others instead of themselves. "We have to tell everyone," she said. "The whole galaxy needs to know what happened here, what humanity did, what they chose." "We will," Al said, pulling himself together. "We will document every shrine, every story, and when we are done, no one will ever forget." They spent 3 days at New Havana documenting everything. Then they continued their journey. There were still hundreds of shrines to visit, hundreds of stories to tell, but knew now that this was more than just a research project. It was a sacred duty. Humanity had given everything to save the galaxy. The least she could do was make sure their gift was remembered. The report submitted to the Galactic Council was unlike anything they had ever received. It was not a dry academic paper. It was a comprehensive documentation of humanity's final years, compiled from thousands of interviews, historical records, and shrine inscriptions. It was 7,000 pages long, and every page contained a story of sacrifice. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, her report was being discussed on every major news network across the galaxy. Scholars demanded access to her raw data. Religious leaders called it the most significant spiritual document in galactic history. Governments scrambled to check their own archives for any human-related records they might have overlooked. People began making pilgrimages to the shrines. At first just a few, then hundreds, then thousands. Beings from species that humans had saved 2,000 years ago traveled to see the monuments with their own eyes. Some left offerings. Others simply stood in silence, paying respect to people who had been dead for. They organized a massive ceremony at Sarah's shrine, attended by over 1 million beings. The declared doctor a patron saint of their medical schools. The added lieutenant commander's name to their warrior hall of honor, the first non-ever to receive such recognition. But the most significant response came from the Galactic Council itself. 3 months after submitted her report, she received a formal summons to appear before the full assembly. She traveled to the council station with her team, uncertain what to expect. The council chamber was packed. Representatives from over 300 species filled the seats. When entered, they all stood in respect. It was unprecedented. The council speaker, a dignified with deep purple skin, approached her. Archivist Keeper, you have presented the council with evidence of the greatest act of collective sacrifice in known history. You have proven that humanity spent their final years saving our ancestors. What you have documented demands a response. The speaker gestured to the chamber. We have debated for weeks. Every species here owes a debt to humanity. Every one of us exists because they chose to die. The question is, what do we do about it? A representative stood. We must honor them, not just maintain the shrines but expand them. Teach their stories in every school. Make sure every child in the galaxy knows what humanity did. A diplomat rose next. We must establish a galactic holiday, a day of remembrance for humanity and all who sacrifice for others. More representatives stood, each offering suggestions. Restore neglected shrines, create new monuments, fund scholarships in human names, establish museums. The proposals poured forth, each more ambitious than the last. Finally, the council speaker raised her hand for silence. All excellent suggestions, and we will implement many of them, but I believe there is something more important we must consider. She turned to face the full chamber. 3 days ago, our researchers made a discovery. In the financial records of the trust fund that maintains the shrines, they found a secondary directive. It was sealed, automated to unlock only if certain conditions were met. Felt her pulse quicken. What conditions? The galactic civilization needed to achieve certain benchmarks of stability and peace, the speaker explained. And the shrines needed to be maintained continuously for 2,000 years. These conditions were meant to prove that any society finding the message would be mature enough to handle what it contained. And have we met these conditions? Al asked. As of last week, yes, the message has unlocked. The speaker's expression was grave. Archivist Keeper, you and your team discovered the shrines. You documented the stories. The council believes you should be the one to receive the message, if you are willing. Looked at her teammates, nodded encouragingly. Al made a gesture of support. Vera's voice came through her communicator. I think we need to see this together. I accept, said. The council speaker led them to a secure chamber deep within the station. Inside, a quantum storage device sat on a pedestal, surrounded by security fields. The speaker entered a long authorization code, and the fields dropped away. This device was placed here by the Galactic Council's predecessor government, acting on instructions from humanity's final administration, the speaker explained. It has been waiting for 2,000 years. When you are ready, activate it. Approached the device. Her hand trembled slightly as she pressed the activation panel. The device hummed to life, and a holographic projection appeared. It showed the same elderly Dr. Sarah from the New Havana recording, but this message was clearly recorded later. She looked even more tired, but her eyes held a spark of hope. Hello, Doctor said. If you are seeing this, then 2,000 years have passed. The galaxy has survived. You have maintained our shrines and kept our stories alive. That tells me something important. You have become the kind of civilization we hoped you would be. She smiled. We could not save ourselves as a species. The cascade was too advanced, too deeply integrated into our biology and technology. But we had brilliant scientists and some time left, so we made a plan. A long-term plan, a gamble on the future. Doctor's expression grew serious. We preserved ourselves, not as we were but as we could be. We created complete genetic templates for every human volunteer who agreed to participate. We archived our culture, our history, our knowledge. Most significantly, we developed technology to preserve consciousness patterns. Not copies, but the actual quantum signatures of individual minds held in stasis. gasped. Around the chamber, others had similar reactions. We placed these storage facilities near each shrine, Doctor continued. 1,247 locations, each containing genetic material, consciousness imprints, and cultural data. We could have tried to restore ourselves immediately after the cascade, but we knew that would be a mistake. A traumatized species emerging into a traumatized galaxy would not work. She leaned forward, her gaze intense even across two. So we made a different choice. We would sleep until the galaxy was ready for us, until enough time had passed that the wounds of the Cascade Wars had healed, until the civilizations we saved had proven they could maintain peace and remember history. We set up the trust fund and the shrines as a test. If the galaxy could maintain memorials for an extinct species for 2,000 years, then it would be a galaxy worth waking up into. Doctor stood. The choice is now yours. You can restore humanity if you choose. We left detailed instructions with each storage facility, or you can let us remain as honored dead. Either choice is acceptable to us. We already got what we wanted. We saved you. Everything else is a gift we do not expect. She smiled one last time. But if you do choose to restore us, know this, we will be grateful, grateful for the second chance, grateful for the galaxy you built, grateful that our sacrifice meant something. We will wake into a world shaped by the choices we made. And I think maybe that is exactly what we hoped for. The recording ended. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the council speaker spoke. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "This is not just about honoring the dead anymore. This is about deciding whether to restore an entire species." Mind reeled. Humanity could come back. After 2,000 years they could return. But should they? "We need to bring this to the full council," the speaker said. "This decision affects everyone, every species, every world. This will be the most significant vote in galactic history." The debate lasted for months. It consumed the entire galaxy. Some species argued that humanity should remain honored dead, that resurrection technology was too dangerous, that some lines should not be crossed. Others insisted that humanity had earned this chance, that denying them would be cruel after what they had sacrificed. Religious leaders debated the spiritual implications. Scientists discussed the technical feasibility. Philosophers argued about identity and consciousness. Historians analyzed precedent. The entire galactic civilization engaged with the question. Found herself at the center of the debate. She gave hundreds of interviews, spoke at countless conferences, before government committees. She told humanity's story over and over, making sure people understood what these beings had done and why it mattered. Finally, after 6 months of debate, the Galactic Council called for a vote. Every member species would decide, restore humanity or let them rest. The vote took place on a day that would be remembered forever, watched from the gallery as the representatives cast their ballots. The chamber was silent except for the soft sounds of votes being recorded. When the final tally appeared, the chamber erupted in noise. The vote was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. Restore humanity. The speaker stood and formally announced the result. By the authority of the Galactic Council and the will of the majority of member species, we hereby authorize the restoration of humanity. The process will begin immediately and will be conducted with care, respect, and appropriate caution. Felt tears running down her face again. Around her, people were cheering, crying, embracing. Humanity would return. The species that had saved the galaxy would get to see what they had saved. But the speaker raised her hand for quiet. This will not be a simple process. We will restore humanity slowly, carefully. We will begin with volunteers who understand they are waking into a very different galaxy. We will provide support, education, integration assistance. This will take generations to complete properly, but we will do it right. We owe humanity that much. The next 5 years were dedicated to preparation. Scientists,